welcome everyone to another weekly team hangout. This time we're joined here with Emanuele again. Emma, it's great to have you back. How are you doing? How have you been?
I'm being terrific. I'm good. I haven't been really anywhere, so apart from being a little sparse in the hangout lately, but it was purposefully done, considering that I do believe that it is important for the community to hear at large from the whole team, or at least those from the team that actually feel okay to chair the hangout. I believe that it provides a 360 degrees on the organization, so it is important that everybody's got a voice. Because believe it or not, we still dwell with a decentralized with decentralized matters. So it's much better when there isn't really a single spokesperson for an organization, but everybody can have their own voice be heard. And as a matter of fact, I think at some point we will also do need to work on the decentralization of the governance of the Dusk organization, protocol, and infrastructure. Infrastructure, we are already working on it, but the governance, not up to now. So I think it is important, basically, that everybody starts to feel important in the community. But regardless, it's nice to be here. It is nice to get back into the hangout.
It is indeed, and I couldn't agree more. I think it was very interesting, even for myself, just having a chat with the different team members of Dusk that are working on each specific product or infra that we're building. It was an insightful chat, even for myself. So I think the community also enjoyed it, to hear the different perspectives of and actually direct information from the people that are working on DuskEVM, on stocks, on Hedger, and get their point of view and hear from their expertise as well. So we had some very interesting chats. The last one I believe was with Milos. I really enjoyed that chat. It was quite insightful, I would say. The first question we have for you today is, have there been any recent conversations with traditional finance institutions that got you personally excited about where Dusk is headed?
It's interesting to use excitement and traditional finance in the same sentence. It's whenever something is a little too exciting, then we know that traditional finance is likely to be a little skeptical about it. They like boring. But personally, I actually find boring exciting. So, we sort of close the circle right there. Yes, there has been some progress on some boring traditional finance topics that basically got me excited. And strangely enough, those have to do primarily with our talks with regulators, which, again, it's probably one of the most excitement repellent body that you can think of. But yes, so the status there is the fact that we made real progress on the DLT-TSS application. And although everything that has got to do with the delivery of a new license, especially a recent one, which so far I believe that's been granted to only 3 different financial institutions that I know of. So again, it's pretty new, and there are a lot of details, but we made real progress, and I think this is what got me excited the most as of late. For those of you that do not remember what the DLTR stands for, is basically the new regulation that allows for the clearance and settlement of real financial assets on a decentralized infrastructure. And there are a lot of, well, not a lot, in fact, there are very, very few that are going for that particular license, because there is either a gap in the technical knowledge that allows traditional financial organizations and institutions to bet and to invest on this new kind of concept, new quote unquote, because nowadays they are around since 10 years at least, smart contracts, decentralized infrastructure, and whatnot. And on the other side, those that do have the technical knowledge, they normally do not have very mature policies, very mature organizations, and very regulation, legal, and financially aware teams that can move forward. Therefore, it is quite difficult to really pioneer that particular pathway, but we are actually going through with that together with our partner NPEX, and there has been some progress in that regard. So that is what got me the most excited lately. But there are many different threads, many different conversations that we are having at the moment. We have been working on the consolidation of the entirety of the ecosystem, and of course this happens through in equal measure between conversations and partnership with the current crypto quote unquote partners and interlocutors, as well as basically traditional ones.
Makes sense. Yeah. And I mean, we have heard from Ryan that we are indeed very close to submitting the final application for the DLT-TSS. So that's really exciting indeed. I know it's been around 2 years or so since we've worked for it. Right?
I want to spend a couple of words about that, because basically the application or submitting the application is might be perceived by some as starting the process, but as a matter of fact, when the application gets filed in its own glory, so to speak, it is more or less, I would say, 3/4 of the overall journey, because it needs to be thoroughly reviewed by the IFM, because the application, especially the application for the DLTR, so for the DLT-TSS, is not only reviewed by the AFM, is not only granted by the AFM, but is actually presented by the AFM together with the applicants to ESMA, which is the European board, if you will, of the regulators. And therefore, before it gets because before the final application happens, then there is a very, very long process, a very long back and forth, very long chiseling around in order to submit the application in the best possible shape, in which all the different kind of aspects need to be taken care of, from the business part, from the revenue part, from the legal part, from and everything, especially what happens in black swan events, and even thinking about what kind of policy is already in place to prevent or to react on black swan events is something that separates those that have or are going for a license from those who actually obtain it.
Right. Yeah, and like you mentioned, the bulk of the work has been done already, because getting the application in a state that is as foolproof as possible to get it approved is the hardest part, and that's why we've also been working with the lawyer firm Norton Full Roads, I believe it's called, which are
Fulbright. But it's not the only one, the only legal studio. Is the one that we have been partnering up with for the application, first and foremost, because of their networking. power and their connection with the regulators, but we also have been working with Watson Law for a very long time now, and there are many other different kind of firms like PricewaterhouseCoopers, for instance, and others that we consult with on a regular basis. The overall application has been quite effort intensive, so I am very happy that we are getting to the final stage. Let me put it that way.
Makes sense. Yeah. That is exciting. Well, since you did mention NPEX and the regulators, and just to keep it on this topic, I'm going to ask a question about that, since we do have a couple. One of them being, what are some notable lessons learned from preparing NPEX and their software stack for blockchain and for using Dusk?
Ignore everything. That is the main lesson that I've been learning. Ignore everything that is already there. Just create a different kind of pathway, something else, a different kind of implementation that in fact just draws from the policies, that complies with the current infrastructure, actually regulatory infrastructure. I'm not talking about technology infrastructure, but regulatory infrastructure that is in place, and make it work with the legacy system. Do not try to get rid of the legacy system and redo everything using blockchain, because it's never going to work. Or rather, it is such an Herculean effort that is really not worth it. It is much better, and this is something that became quite clear after a while. It is much better to keep the legacy system alive, working with the current business model, the current investors, and create an alternative one or a parallel one, which is DLT base. Serve the DLT part first, keep the tokenization part well separated from the rest, and work on integrating afterwards. This is our current strategy, and it is probably the hardest lesson that I have been learning since I've been working with that system. And there are many different reasons for it. So one of the reasons is the fact that again, regulators, for instance, they mandate their focus is on investor protection, right? And we can talk a lot about what it means, investor protection, because investor protection, for some is is the capability or otherwise to invest in different kind of assets which might or might not be perceived risky. In this case, investor protection means primarily the capability of ensuring continuity if in an event, what I called black swan events, right? So in the event of a bankruptcy, in the event of a failure of the systems and these kind of things. And what sets apart a system that is a working system, a legacy system, from another is another done in an amatorial basis almost, is how secure the system is. So probably in a financial infrastructure worthy of the name, a secure financial infrastructure, there is roughly 35% of the business logic which supports the business, and the rest supports the continuity of the business in case of catastrophic failures. This means that you have to do the same with DLT. And for what concerns blockchain, then we are also trained in thinking about attack, about vulnerability, in all these kind of things. But it's a different kind of vulnerability, right? So if you are trying to create this boilerplate and to make the system as secure as the legacy one, using the new software, then you're never going to stop developing. It is really, really a very big task. So it is much better to basically concentrate and focus on a different kind of business unit, one that deals primarily with tokenization, one that deals primarily with this new type of digitization, and try to basically make that secure in a decentralized context, rather than migrating the security valves and all the security certainty that the legacy system already has onto the new system, because that is really, really complex. So that, I would say, is probably the most important lesson learned in trying to ignite this new kind of business models around a decentralized infrastructure for an existing financial institution.
Got it. All right. And since you did mention something about the black swan, someone is asking in chat. I see, in case of a black swan event, what happens to the blockchain? What happens to Dusk? They're asking if if you have to stop the blockchain. So I think there might be some confusion there, which you can clear out.
It is important basically to stress the fact that black swan events or catastrophic events, continuity plan, this kind of things in a decentralized environment are inherently very different than a centralized one, right? So, for instance, in a decentralized environment, it doesn't really make sense to talk that much about distribution. Why? Because it is inherently a distributed system. Whereas in a centralized one, in a legacy one, what happens if all the servers go down? Well, in a blockchain, it doesn't really matter. I mean, if a node goes down, the entirety of the infrastructure has been engineered to keep going, no matter how many nodes are there. It can work with one, it will work with 100. In our case, in the Dusk case, it will work with 1,000 even. That's why we took our sweet time to basically deliver a consensus that works in a completely decentralized environment. However, for instance, what happens in the case, for example, for a decentralized system in which there can be an economic attack. And nowadays, this is actually turning to be a very important risk, right? Especially with a shrinking market cap, or in the presence of an attacker that has got a lot of financial means. This doesn't make any sense in the case of a centralized environment, because a centralized environment is a permissioned environment, and therefore, the administrator of that system can simply just override whatever kind of operation comes from even a principal stakeholder, right? But this is very important for what concerns DLT. So these two kind of quote unquote catastrophic events, or the domain of catastrophic events, have very, very small overlap in both. And in our application, we had to provide explanation. We had to provide fail-safe capabilities in both cases, in both scenarios. And some of those might be entirely theoretic, and for the sake of speed, if you will, some of them have been simplified. But in the application, in the context of the application, they need to be explained pretty thoroughly, and you need to have policies in place. And sometimes when you are talking about decentralization, then policies can be quite complex. At the moment, the governance of the Dusk protocol is not entirely decentralized. There is a de facto reliance on the Dusk organization, but indeed also through the application we have to start working on the decentralization of governance too.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for the explanation and for clearing that out. Now, keeping it NPEX themed, because there are a couple more questions on that, and then we can move to other topics. Someone is asking that in an article about payroll and IceCat, it says NPEX will continue its traditional listing activities while focusing on growth in three main areas. First, the Dutch company will develop NPEX Connect, a digital platform that links small and medium-sized SMEs with high net worth individuals. Secondly, NPEX will enhance its securities and admin services to better manage existing securities. And lastly, the Dutch firm aims to simplify access for SMEs through its direct listings, making the process easier. And someone's asking, can you speak a bit about this and how Dusk is involved, if Dusk is involved in any of these 3 points? I've never seen anything said by NPEX about transitioning to blockchain, etc. So I was surprised to see these growth areas mentioned. You, as the CTO, are probably a good person to ask.
Probably I am the best person to ask this particular question, so I'm very happy to answer. So I'm going off the record, actually on the record here, and say take always with a little grain of salt what goes around on media, because sometimes they tend to oversimplify things, and it also depends what is the audience that they are trying to appeal to. So if you actually read something from CoinDesk or any other kind of crypto-friendly media or magazine, then blockchain is obviously the main point, it's the main focus, and everything will revolve around blockchain. And next year, probably our entire identity is going to be on chain, and banks are going to be displaced. If you actually read Bloomberg, then you might have half and half. If you basically just go with the Financiële Dagblad, then perhaps they will not mention Bitcoin or blockchain or decentralized infrastructure, not to confuse their audience, which are sometimes is not exactly overlapping with the crypto crowd. Let me put it that way. The truth is the fact that there are a number of different kind of imprecisions in that article, and I have been reading it too. I've been reading the press release, and I know whom that particular press release is going to focus on and target. And therefore, there are a couple of things that I can say. So first of all, Dusk is in fact developing the entirety of infrastructure for NPEX. There isn't at the moment a technical department inside of NPEX. Dusk is the technical department of NPEX. That said, it is also true that while we provide our own developers to NPEX, not all these developers actually are involved on the DLT side, because, like I said, there is a part which at the moment counts for more than 90% of the income, of the revenue of NPEX, which basically is still relying on their traditional business model, which has got to do with listing SMEs, right? So it's not that we could, put a pause on that and then we are going to migrate the entirety of the business onto the DLT part, and revenue be damned. That's not how any of this works. So while basically these developers are in fact trying to modernize the very ancient technology infrastructure that is in NPEX, but without really integrating or without adding any new element coming from the DLT, while there is this effort, there is also the effort of creating this parallel infrastructure that in fact uses the full power of Dusk, as a matter of fact, in order to create a new application. Internally, this application was called Stocks, but this is an internal name. We are going to unveil the real name of this application, which, by the way, is an NPEX application. very soon. But the important point here is the fact that that part is developed in parallel, and until it is going to be launched and until it is going to create revenue, then it makes little sense to talk about an investment that is done primarily for things that are about to come. From a strategic point of view, NPEX is still in the 90s with their infrastructure. And we are working in order to migrate their ancient infrastructure to a modern stack, which is still a centralized stack that satisfies their current immediate needs. And these immediate needs is to reinvigorate their current existing investor base, which is high net worth individual, but older gentlemen, for instance, family office, that in fact at the moment do need something like NPEX Connect. So they do need something that is a little more mobile friendly, not a little more, because NPEX system is not mobile friendly. In fact, it depends on a third-party system which is developed in Delphi, believe it or not. So at the moment, so this is the first imprecision. There isn't something like, there are only these three things and there is nothing else that they are working on. Actually, they are betting their entire future, technological future, in offloading the technology aspect to Dusk and through our partnership. That is the first imprecision. The second imprecision is the fact that IceCat and Parel, while it is true that they have been investing in NPEX alongside Dusk, because we actually invested in NPEX again last year. Nobody knows about that. There was no PR done about it because it was a small amount, and we keep investing also in kind, not only in money, because so far we have been incurring, I believe, something a little over $500,000 in cost just to develop this system, which, by the way, we are incurring this cost entirely ourselves. Nobody is talking about that because there was no PR about that. It's not really that sexy. What this operation, what this transaction was about, was basically about the exit of INCEF, which is one of the investment arm of ABP, which is one of the biggest pension fund, and their stake was purchased by IceCat and Parel. The reason why INCEF exited NPEX has got nothing to do with NPEX itself. INCEF is going to be liquidated, is going essentially just to merge back into ABP, and ABP is not going to invest in small businesses anymore. So it is actually liquidating, I believe, something along the line of 500 million different kind of investments that they did. So because there is such a big financial institution that in fact is doing an operation, then this deserved a little bit of coverage. And it's not an investment when some shareholders actually buy shares from another company, or rather, it is an investment for them, but it's not an investment in NPEX, simply because there is no emission of new shares. This money doesn't go to NPEX directly. Now, again, IceCat, Parel, and Dusk, together with other shareholders, have been investing in NPEX itself. Again, last year it was the last one. There is another round that is probably going to be open very soon. But this is not really the same as, just a very big and important financial institution is going to liquidate its investment and the shareholders are going to buy them. So this is the second imprecision about that. And the third imprecision is the fact that essentially they are not really talking about, the real innovation that NPEX is going for, which I have been talking about at the very beginning of this conversation, which is the DLT-TSS, DLTR application. There is absolutely no mention of that. And why? Well, simply because, first of all, applying for the application is a little less sexy than giant bags of money basically just moving around. And second of all, it probably dilutes the imminent granting of this license. So there are a lot of different kind of imprecision. I hope that I provided a little bit of clarity about what is really going on. So to summarize, Dusk is in fact developing essentially two different systems. One, the migration from the ancient third-party owned technology that NPEX uses at the moment that desperately needs to be modernized, and the new applications with a name that is going to be unveiled very soon, that in fact is completely based on the DLT. Dusk is doing both. So, and he's doing both, and he's doing all that there is to do technology-wise at NPEX.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think that provides a very good explanation, and even for myself, I understood it. I understood the whole situation quite well, and how this impacts everyone, or doesn't necessarily impact a lot of the things that are currently going on at NPEX or Dusk. And the sexy part is going to be most probably when the internal application that we're working on, internal name being stocks, is going to come out. That's going to be the sexy part, I would say. Really looking forward to that. In terms of NPEX's questions, then we had quite a lot about this recent acquisition by Payroll Investment in Ice Capital, but I think that answers most of them. So I'm going to skip a couple of them, and I see there is some question in relation to NPEX, if there are any publicly available numbers about the yearly transaction volume, number of transaction, the current fee structure. And things like that, forecasted yearly transaction volume or number of transaction. Are there any way for the community to have or to check these publicly somewhere?
So NPEX is not a publicly traded company, and therefore basically its books are not available in public. What I can say is the fact that the current business model, the one that at the moment is the revenue stream of NPEX is coming from, is heavily skewed toward issuances, right? So the primary mean for NPEX business model to sustain itself is basically to have new issuances, and getting a percentage of this issuance and presenting it to the investor base. This means essentially that these issuances depend entirely on the nature of the financial products that are created, and more than 90% are bonds, right? And bonds are quite an illiquid, in their basic form, they're quite an illiquid asset. It's not really traded that frequently. They are traded, but not really. Not really. They don't really. What's the word I'm searching for? It's not a relevant amount of revenue that is generated through the transaction because of the nature of these bonds. Now, this is also one of the things that makes DeFi, actually Reg DeFi, regulated decentralized finance, so appealing, because this kind of illiquid product, like bonds, for instance, they are very good in being collateral for a different, more liquid counterparty, right? I mean, if you think about Ondo, for instance, to name a very successful one, they turned something which is a government obligation, so U.S. government obligation, as collateral for a yield-bearing asset that is actually just seeing a lot more liquidity. Why? Because that asset, being decentralized in nature, or rather being we can talk about some degree of Reg DeFi there, is composable with something else. And whenever there is this kind of composability, then you can create an entirely new asset that is collateralized through an illiquid one, but you don't really care about the illiquid one. You care about basically the one that gets traded, and that can be composed with other application in order, for instance, to ignite a lending market. And the lending market based on a collateral which is safe, like or at least overseen by regulators, like a bond, for instance. Well, that can be very, very interesting because the kind of yield that is coming from the coupon of these bonds. These bonds, since are not really traded that much, then they can be redeemed very easily for a spread, but by the financial institutions that actually emit them, and none is the wiser. So you don't have things like the dreadful Luna, in which there is this balance between the stable coin and something else that is seen as a collateral, but the collateralization is questionable. Here, the collateralization is guaranteed by real businesses or governments, right? So the collateral is as safe as basically the rating that goes with that collateral itself. Therefore, these other composable assets, they are way more liquid. So to get back to my previous points, the bonds that at the moment NPEX is dealing with, which have different kind of ratings, those that are deemed the most secure, because by through the due diligence, through the analysis of sturdiness of the businesses or those that issue these kind of assets, you can infer essentially how secure these assets are. Even if the assets are not traded that much themselves, they can still be the collateralization for another asset that becomes a decentralized asset that can be composed, that can be the object of a lending market, that can be the object of pools, that can be the object of a lot of different things, wrapped and unwrapped. So it can be for KYC individual and even non-KYC individual when they are not allowed to redeem that particular assets. And then suddenly you have USDT, which is essentially just based on a lot of different other assets, which normally are quite illiquid themselves. But look at USDT; it is traded practically everywhere, and it is quite liquid. Now, when you want to redeem USDT, then you need to go to Tether. But who does that? No one does that, right? So if you have USDT and you actually want to trade it for euros or for dollars, you don't go to Tether, also because Tether makes it incredibly difficult for you to redeem real dollars for these kind of assets. You go to a secondary market. So you go to an exchange, and then you get your dollar through an exchange. And then you have different kind of spreads, then you have arbitrage, then you have a lot of different kind of applications. See? Well, this is essentially the evolution of these assets. And so to get back to the question, basically, how many transactions are right now being cleared and settled by NPEX itself? Not that many. However, the fact that NPEX has a little over 200 million in asset under management makes this 200 million an incredibly good collateral for liquid or hopefully liquid assets that are going to be issued and that are going to ignite an entirety of an ecosystem. And the interesting thing is that since actually Dusk is very close to this collateral, this kind of liquidity can come not only from the Dusk ecosystem, but also from other ecosystems, provided that essentially these assets are going, in fact, to be issued on Dusk itself. In this case, basically on the application layer of Dusk or DuskEVM.
Right. Yeah. I think that answers that question, and that's the last question we have on NPEX. So we can move to more Dusk-related questions now. Someone's asking, hi Emma, for me, native issuance remains Dusk USB. Can you share some insights in the current path towards native issuance? Is it planned for 2026? A recent X post mentioned long-term native issuance. What does long-term mean for you? Are you convinced Dusk will be able to keep its first mover advantage of this with all the funding going into other projects? We discussed a bit about the license and the application process for that, and I assume, since it is quite a hard process and not a lot of, only 3 other companies do have the license, and it's not even exactly the full license that we're getting, right? It's quite different from us. I would assume it's quite hard for other companies to be able to do native issuance because they do need to get the license, and in order to get the license, it's quite a long process, right?
Right. So when we're talking about native issuance, let me dispel some myth here, and let me be a little bit clearer. Okay. So when we're talking about native issuance, then we are talking about the capability of creating an icing code on a financial product, right? These icing code at the moment they are stored, they are associated with different kind of financial products that in fact are available on certain platforms. And when you go to these platforms, you buy these financial products, and then you can trade them. And then when you trade them, then that financial product needs to be cleared somewhere, need to be settled somewhere. Normally, when we are talking about securities, then they are settled on a CSD, and they are cleared by a clearing bank. Now, let's say, for instance, that there is no CSD, or rather the CSD is a closed system, is within a closed system, then we can do native issuance right now. There's nothing special about that. It's basically digitization. It is digitization of a certain financial asset, of a certain asset, or rather an asset which is associated with an icing code, right? Now, where is the absolute power of this native issuance? It's not exactly on the issuance itself, is in the capability of basically settling. It is the capability of moving these kind of assets independently on where they are issued. Because if at the moment I am issuing an asset on Euronext, and the asset is just there on Euronext and never leaves Euronext, and and the only thing that you have to redeem is basically going to Euronext and trade there, then essentially that native issuance is pretty useless, isn't it? I mean, it's useful because you may have a secondary market, but for the purpose of the free, open, and trustless capabilities that an infrastructure provides, basically that native issuance is completely bogus. The native issuance is actually the capability of transcending the limits of different kind of financial venues and creating a venue that is absolutely protocol-wide available to everybody. Now, what does that mean exactly? It means that if, for instance, I have a certain financial institution, 21X, for instance, if they issue an asset, if they natively, or rather, if they create these assets, that asset live inside of the blockchain rather than a database on 21X. Where is the advantage in something like that? Well, basically the fact that if that asset is then traded with somebody else somewhere else, then 21X essentially just doesn't really have to have any kind of intermediation on that asset itself. The clearance and settlements happens through a decentralized or a distributed system in which every single kind of noded infrastructure essentially participates with all the rest. What does this mean? It means essentially that to have an open system, then you need to have multiple different kind of capabilities for clearing and settling. You need to have both the financial institution with its own license that allows for that to happen, and you need to have a decentralized system in which far and wide all the different kind of application can use that license, and in the background, basically the capability for everybody to add securities to the system, and the clearance happens inherently inside of the system itself. So sorry for this very, very large and very long preamble, but essentially the native issuance as is just a part of a bigger ecosystem. So there isn't things like first mover or something like that, because first mover for native issuance essentially means the capability of issuing certain particular assets protocol wide. And there isn't really a protocol wide organization out there in which all the assets are freely available on the network, and they are covered by a license. Why? Because on everything else, this is not Dusk, Dusk vision and what we are working on, but everywhere else, like Beetle, for instance, that's a very good example. Beetle is essentially just it embodies the capability of creating this ISIN code, associating them on a certain asset, which is a decentralized asset, which is a token, but that token is inherently linked to BlackRock and nobody else. It's not Vanguard that can do that. Why? Because Ethereum does not have a widely available license that BlackRock agrees to put at disposal to everyone that wants to essentially trade. Which means, why? Because BlackRock essentially just says, I have no interest in opening up. I actually want to have all the different kind of advantages of tokenization. I want to tap into an untapped liquidity pool, which is crypto ones. I want to avail of composition, but only for those applications that I actually just permit everybody else to compose with. It's not what Dusk is trying to do. So you see, it's not about what kind of technology you're using. It's not about what kind of protocol you're using. It's about basically the real power of native issuance has got to do with the capability or the sacrifice even of a financial institution that agrees to extend its own license to the entirety of a protocol, and the protocol that is made to comply with all the different kind of policies that inherently are linked to that financial institution, because otherwise the financial institution loses the license, and basically says any kind of composition on these assets inherently are clearable and settlable. I am very sorry for this neologism. I don't know how to express them a little bit better than that, but those are basically the real power of native issuance, the capability of clearing and settling automatically through a set of different kind of smart contracts, with the synergies with different kind of financial applications that are sitting not really in the back end, but are sitting in the protocol itself to extend the license to everything. So we are farther ahead than everybody else. Of course, if Ondo tomorrow basically just gets an MTF license, or BlackRock at some point just generously says, well, you know what, in the interest of humanity, we will extend our license to the entirety of Ethereum. And by the way, they don't really have an MTF license or a security license. They are just an issuer. They are an investment fund. But let's say that, for instance, they had them. If they would do that, then Dusk wouldn't have any motivation to exist. We would essentially just take the application that we have, stocks, let's call it stocks for now, and create it on Ethereum, and none is the wiser. It would be about basically at that particular point in time providing the quality of assets to the investor base, to the community, and the capability, of providing certain part of governance. But my bet is that this is never gonna happen. Why it is happening with NPEX and Dusk? Well, with Dusk is actually pretty simple, because the more we are capable of basically bringing this vision to life, the more there is an incentive for anyone to actually issue on top of Dusk, and Dusk gets used. All we want is basically for Dusk to get used as an infrastructure. NPEX incentive is what they have been doing so far. They have been tapping into knowledge that they didn't have, that probably very few other organizations have in terms of technology in the world right now, because NPEX is essentially just making use of Dusk, tapping into the knowledge that we have of blockchain, paying very little for all the different kind of development, and being able essentially to profit from the transition to this new form of application by opening up new revenue stream for them, and at the same time essentially just decentralizing their own infrastructure and kind of slashing the costs of their entire infrastructure. So you need to have both. And BlackRock doesn't really have this problem. BlackRock has the problem of actually creating a new market for itself. And expertise-wise, Ethereum doesn't really want to become a hub for securities. Ethereum has global ambition, right, on a lot of different things. And we are a small organization. We have to basically stay focused on what we want to do it in the best possible way with the best technology that we are capable of providing, and advancing not only the current financial infrastructure topic, but also providing new ideas, and for how it is possible for us being innovative in our way. For instance, by providing privacy and compliance at the same time. So, related to native issuance, I really don't believe that there is anyone that in fact is actually grasping the entirety of the vision for native issuance, what it really means, which is not really about issuance itself, it's about the entirety of the ecosystem of assets that essentially just draw from crypto, that help small businesses, small or big businesses, by providing liquidity through a direct interfacing with investors, and providing investors the capability of actually just exiting and entering a market which would otherwise be liquid, or even if it would be liquid, but with applications that they themselves can choose and can compose with each other. We want basically richness of assets. This comes from the conversation about FAT protocols back in 2018. I'm still on that. I'm that boring. So I hope I provided a little bit of a perspective on that question.
No, 100%, and I don't think that was a boring explanation, and I think that clears a lot of confusion, and it was a really thorough explanation of the overall vision. The next question is about the stocks dApp, and someone's asking that in their opinion, this seems to indicate a shift from purely institutional infra approach to relying on direct consumer adoption. Is that the case, or is stocks just one prong of the fork? And I think what explained just
stocks
now
is,
kind of answers a bit.
Yeah, stocks is basically the stocks is perhaps it is best if we think of stocks as a hub, as an application, and as a hub application, right? A hub is essentially just a port, is where a lot of different kind of assets get shipped, and when they come from different kind of means of transportation, then they get distributed somewhere else, right? So stocks is essentially just the connection between the decentralized world and the financial world, so to speak. So that assets, in fact, are created, or they are synthesized. It also depends on what kind of assets we're talking about. And they become available through the stocks interface. Now, you can access them on stocks, and then you can compose them and migrate them at will to other kind of applications that are going to be present on the Dusk ecosystem, whether they are DEX, whether so you want to trade them, or whether it's a lending market, or you want to migrate them to another chain, or these kind of things. This is basically something that is in the capabilities of the users of stocks. Now, since we are talking about securities here, then most likely there are going to be two different kind of audience for this kind of product. One is the KYC audience, because in order for anyone to own securities, then they need to be KYC. There is no way around it. Okay, this is the regulation. But it is also true that there can be a rapid asset, right, for non-KYC people, and these non-KYC people, as a matter of fact, can trade this asset. But in order for them to redeem, then and to have the underlying securities traded, then they have to onboard on the financial application. But we are going to make it very, very simple for everyone to do. So yes, direct access is the key, but there are also different kind of flavors of direct access, from the most permissionless, which probably will be very appealing to a certain crowd that believes in full and complete decentralization, at the with probably some features that are unavailable to them, but it shouldn't really be any problem associated with that. And those that in fact want the full-fledged features, they want to deal with securities, they want to be able to redeem, for instance, directly with the issuer. And for those, they basically need to be KYC, but it is still direct access.
Got it. It is the top of the hour, Emma, but would you want to stay a bit more to answer a couple more questions, or would you like to continue these another time? We might get to a bunch of them via text as well.
Let's give it another couple of questions. I mean, as long as my kids are not are not breaking in and playing piano, then I think we're fine.
Makes sense. Yeah, as long as the wife is also happy, then we're probably good. The wife and kids, right? One of the question was, so a while back, I think the last time we had a chat on the Hangout, you were referring to DuskEVM being coming relatively soon, and that was because at the time it was DuskEVM testnet and devnet was going very smoothly. And someone was asking if you already sensed that it could stretch a couple more months, or did the internal timeline shift, or what exactly happened? And I know I'm not sure if we talked about exactly what happened from then till now, but we did mention that there were a couple of bugs that we had to that came up, and we already dealt with them. But maybe we can explain a bit of what the bugs were.
All right. So this is a little bit of an imprecision. We're not really talking about bugs. We're talking about something a little more involved. But
Right.
First of all, I would like to apologize to the community for my optimism. I am really I'm optimistic by nature, and I could not be not optimistic, because otherwise In order to be an entrepreneur, you need to be incredibly stupid and willing to live on the edge and live through a lot of different risks, and sometimes you basically get fooled by your own hope, and you tend to misread circumstances. For that, I absolutely apologize. At the same time, I don't apologize, because without my optimism, then essentially this entire project probably wouldn't even exist. Because if I knew in 2017, 2018, what would it take in order to make a layer one protocol with ambition to decentralize the entirety of the financial ecosystem, adding privacy to it and regulatory compliance, then probably I would have done something else. For sure, would have sold. I would have probably just started an AI company, and at this particular point in time, I would be filthy rich. But I really don't regret anything. I actually do think that what we are doing is really awesome. That said, where my misplaced optimism and enthusiasm came from, it came from the fact that essentially just the day before, in which I actually just optimistically told everybody that DuskEVM was coming probably sooner than anybody expected, is because I actually thought that we were, I saw the layer 2, so DuskEVM, essentially just chugging blocks, chugging transaction, having quite good performance the day before. And this because essentially there is a proxy in between that translates basically the entirety of the technology of the layer 1 into something that the EVM can chew. So this was going quite smoothly for quite some time. So I saw it, for instance, all these different kind of transactions just working. Except that at some point we started to see reorganization on the layer 2. What does it mean, reorganization? Well, essentially the layer 2 thought that the layer 1 was not, in fact, finalizing blocks, which didn't really resonate with me, because we implemented the blob transaction, and the blob transaction was in fact just accepted by the layer 1. Now, the problem with that is the fact that the layer 2 have a logic in which essentially the receipts of the transaction need to be obtained from the layer 1. So there is a concept of finality which the proxy did not really provide, and this was the cause for all these kind of reorganizations. As it turns out, basically there were several different kind of methods missing, which were very poorly, if documented at all, on the layer 2. So we got a list of different kind of methods that the layer 1, for instance Ethereum, just provides to the layer 2, for instance Optimism. We implemented those, we migrated those, then we saw the layer 2 just starting to create blocks after blocks after blocks with a lot of different transactions, and a lot of different transaction, just process at light speed, and so I thought, well, this is actually being very close. So the transactions are there, the blocks are chugging. We have been I've seen that working 10 hours ago. It is still working. We are close, right? Except that there is, if this is the list of different kind of methods that need to be available to the layer 2 from the layer 1 that are documented and we saw, then there is an amount that is more or less triple in size, like this, which is not documented at all. And then at some point, the layer 2 actually expect. And we started to see these kind of methods that were missing. So we started to see this reorganization that happened after several hours, because the layer 2, after I think 12 hours, 24 hours, essentially, if it doesn't really get all these different kind of methods, if it calls the method and it doesn't really receive an answer or receives an empty answer, then it detects a mismatch between its internal state and what is the state that it thinks that the layer one actually settled and finalized, right? So we basically uncovered this method by trial and error because they are really not documented anywhere. And then we started to essentially just reverse engineer the code of optimism. And you have absolutely no idea how messy that can be. I mean, it is absolutely amazing to me that Ethereum is working. This is the reality of this thing. It's really stunning to me, the amount of legacy stuff that need to basically be exposed to the layer 2 for the layer 2 to work. So because of that, then we uncovered little by little all the different kind of missing methods. A lot of these methods basically relied on a different kind of set of signature that it's not really the signature schemes that we are using on the layer one. We even use different kind of cryptographic curve because Ethereum uses SecP, and we use BLS 12381 for as curve. And we had to map little by little, slowly, all these things, and basically just fix all the problem through a process of trial and error. So there wasn't really, not only my optimism was misplaced, but there wasn't really any indication of how long this process would take, because from a reasonable perspective, how many of these methods can be missing? Probably there is one undocumented, right? Probably two. Instead, we really stumble upon a number of those. Also, the other inefficiency was the fact that while we basically wanted to accelerate, and therefore we brought in a third-party development company with some specific Ethereum knowledge. Then, because of that, then at some point when it basically was up to us to actually delve into the code of Ethereum, then we had to gain this knowledge by doing that, which finally it came to a conclusion. So I believe since 48 hours we have finally everything in place. There is still something related to the bridge, but this has got nothing to do with the layer 2. The layer 2 at the moment is working. I've been talking to Sepia this morning and to Ein, and they basically are very pleased also with the performance that DuskEVM is having. I mean, Sepia mentioned something along the line of 2,000 transactions per second, steadily cleared by DuskEVM, and we saw no reorganization. We saw we saw essentially the finalization happening, and so this means that the overall connection between the layer one, so DuskDS and DuskEVM, is quite in a good state right now. So that those problems are solved. All the different kind of missing pieces have been implemented and thoroughly documented, at least internally, so that we know what we are talking about. At the moment, I have been requesting the team to actually try and understand what happens in the case, for instance, there is no finalization on DuskDS, which is a theoretical problem that could happen. This is not only a point, kind of to be sure exercise. This is also something that we need to document thoroughly for the policy that we are doing for the DLTR, because as a matter of fact, the DLTR is also going to be implemented on the application layer, so on DuskEVM. So we need to understand what happens on DuskEVM in case DuskDS, for instance, does not finalize blocks because of a split or something like that. But we have quite some good experience with reorganization, so we actually have a very good idea what the layer 2 will do, and we have no cause to believe that there are going to be problems there. So that's roughly the story of my statement, and what happened afterwards. It's a little bit of a Murphy's Law story. I was quite confident that we were going to roll out at least the testnet of DuskEVM, if not after 24 hours, but at least basically the week after. This didn't happen, and again, it was the cause of a lot of stress for the team. But everybody have been working tirelessly, basically, to make this work. It is also true that another factor that contributed to my misunderstanding is the fact that nobody has ever done that. Nobody actually is using a non-EVM chain to settle on an EVM transaction. This is a world's first. So we basically just pioneered this road, and hopefully some other teams are going to benefit from our knowledge and experience.
100%. It's definitely pioneering this is definitely going to be worth it, and it sounds like it's been a roller coaster of emotions and everything. But it's good to hear that it is solved right now, and it's currently working smoothly, and that the work that's left is mainly around documentation and bridge, right? So that's good to hear, and of course we're gonna have more.
It's not it's not it's not a lot of work, but what do I know? I mean, I have been I have been very mistaken in the past, but I haven't been losing my optimism. I'm sorry, that's just the person that I am. So I remain very optimistic that we will be able to basically roll this out in a timely manner. Take my words with a pinch of salt for what it's worth. I have been very wrong in the past. Probably I will be wrong in the future, but even a broken watch is right twice per day, right?
Right. Frankly, I mean, there is a lot to be optimistic about and excited. So I share that sentiment. And okay, then one last question, if you would like to. But one of the questions I had next here, and I see there is a bunch of people that are also asking in chat, is around a date, around the roadmap, and around what's the plan. And I know we're not ready to share a date yet, and a date and an announcement like that will probably get shared officially in our announcement channel and on our socials once we're ready to indeed share that. In terms of the roadmap, Ryan did share with us that for 2025 we are aiming to get DuskEVM and stocks out with listings and partner announcements in between, and afterwards as well, and going into the DLTR license. With that in mind, is there anything else that you would like to add in terms of dates or roadmap, or your opinion on this?
Well, I think Ryan said it very well. I think it is important also to basically understand one thing. I mean, roadmap can be very fuzzy, right? So roadmap are a vision statement. So I'm not really focused on roadmap as much anymore. I am actually focused on one thing: going live as soon as possible. Going live, because going live essentially will basically make everything that we are working on, come to life. And there are parties that are waiting for us to go live. It's not only about the community that wants to see progress. It's not only about the team that wants to basically just showcase what we have been working on. It's also, at this point in time, is also becoming a very important matter also for our partners, because there are some, for instance, that want to open up a certain particular market, crypto or the decentralized market, the tokenization market, however you want to call it, with especially in Europe. And we have some commitments with them, and we need to essentially we need to deliver on those commitments. So this is really the statement that I feel like sharing. It's not about roadmap. Of course, the roadmap again is is the lighthouse that essentially just enlightens the journey. But at the moment, we are very, very pragmatically focused on actually launching the entirety of the infrastructure. And this needs to happen sooner rather than later. And yeah, that's the most important. That is the most important for us.
Yeah, indeed. And I guess a little alpha, which we could share with some of the community here, is that we will indeed start a build-up phase very soon, and they should expect a build-up phase to start in October with some announcement. Just a little alpha for you guys for being here. Not gonna say what specific, but yeah. Because I know some of you have asked, when are the fireworks starting? We're gradually gonna start the build-up phase, and you're soon going to see a couple of what that is. No announcement of announcement.
No announcement.
Maybe,
of
who knows?
announcement. I actually agree. Also, I think it is very interesting, the American market.
Indeed.
And with that, I think I am going to stop right here.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Emma. I know we've already stayed, 20 minutes past the top of the hour. So thank you for taking the time to answer the extra questions. And we did got through quite a lot of subjects and questions. More than I expected. We still have a couple of which we'll get to probably in text. We might just answer them in chat, or we'll see the best way to do that. But thank you again. And we've actually had a really great turn up this time, one of the best we've had so far. So thank you guys for being here. Thank you for asking the great questions. And I think this was an interesting and insightful conversation. It was good to have you back on the Hangouts, Emma. It's always a good time. And we'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you. Have a good day, Emma. And see you around.
Thank you, everybody.